Now let's connect our four 12-volt batteries in the 24-volt configuration as shown in the following diagram.
Arrange your four 12-volt batteries as shown. Battery 1, Battery 2, Battery 3, and Battery 4. Connect the negative terminal of Battery 1 with the positive terminal of Battery 2. Then connect the negative terminal of Battery 3 with the positive terminal of Battery 4. Connect the negative terminal of Battery 2 with the negative terminal of Battery 4. Finally, connect the positive terminal of Battery 1 with the positive terminal of Battery 3. Now, our four 12-volt batteries are connected in the 24-volt configuration that is required to operate the inverter.
Just as shown in the diagram, we have Battery 1, positive, negative, Battery 2, positive, negative, then Battery 3, positive, negative, and Battery 4, positive, negative. Now let's wire them together according to the diagram. Now let's grab one of the four 1-foot 4-gauge battery connect cables, and we're going to use it to connect from the negative of Battery 1 to the positive of Battery 2. Let's go ahead and do that now. If you want to save a little bit of money, you can build your own battery connect cables. Just go to your building supply store and have them cut you four 1-foot pieces of 4-gauge cable, and then buy 8 4-gauge ring terminals, and then cut about 3/4 inch off the end of each of your 1-foot pieces of 4-gauge cable and put your ring terminal on the end, and then just get a hammer, pound it down until you have a nice tight connection. We're going from the negative terminal on Battery 1 to the positive terminal on Battery 2. Then let's tighten down our wing nuts on both terminals. Okay, let's do the same thing on Battery 3 and 4. Again, we're connecting the negative terminal from Battery 3 to the positive terminal of Battery 4, and then we're tightening down our wing nuts. Now let's grab the next battery connect cable. And we're going to connect the negative terminal on Battery 2 to the negative terminal on Battery 4. We're going to tighten down the wing nuts. And then let's grab our last battery connect cable. We'll connect the positive terminal from Battery 1 to the positive terminal on Battery 3. We'll tighten down our wing nuts. Now we're done connecting our four 12-volt batteries in the 24-volt configuration. Now we're on to our next step. Now let's begin putting together the power cable that goes from the batteries to the inverter. We start with two very thick 0-gauge power cables. The red cable will connect to the positive input on the inverter, and the black cable will connect to the negative input on the inverter. Essentially, this is all you really need to connect your batteries to the inverter. However, we are going to add a 200 amp fuse and a battery disconnect switch. And we're doing this to add some safety into our system and to follow the National Electric Code. Let's get started now. First, let's unpackage the battery switch and the fuses. We only need one. And then the fuse holder. We'll set the fuse and the fuse holder aside for the moment. Let's grab the battery switch, and we're going to need to pop the back cover off. So grab a couple flathead screwdrivers and pry the back cover off the switch. There we go. Now, let me explain what we need to do next. Look at the 3-foot red power cable. The end with the larger diameter connector is going to connect to the positive terminal on the battery. The end with the smaller diameter connector needs to connect to the battery switch. But as you can see, the battery switch terminal
Is not quite small enough.
So we need to drill out the diameter on this connector a little bit more. We don't want to drill the diameter out too much. Go ahead and fit check it. Almost there. I've got a slightly smaller drill bit that I'm going to use. Again, let's fit check it. Just a little bit more. Okay, there we go. You've got it at the right diameter now to fit on the switch terminal. Now look at the bottom of the switch. One terminal is marked common, the other terminal is marked battery. We are going to connect the 3-foot long red power cable to the terminal marked battery. You may need a wrench to loosen the nut. Then you should be able to do it by hand. Remove the lock washer. Keep the regular washer on the terminal. Slide our connector over the terminal. Again, over the terminal marked battery. Put our lock washer back on. Replace the nut. Hand tighten it. Grab our little wrench. Tighten it up the rest of the way. Make sure it's nice and snug. There we go. Okay, step 1 is now complete. Now for step 2. Grab the shorter 1-foot red power cable, and we're going to connect it to the terminal marked common on the switch. So let's grab our wrench, loosen the nut. Again, we're going to remove it by hand. Then remove the lock washer. Get our 1-foot red power cable. Put our lock washer back on. Tighten down the nut by hand. And then get it nice and snug with our wrench. Perfect. Step 2, now complete. To get the cover back on the battery switch, we're going to need to loosen both nuts just a little bit. And align the cables like this. And then tighten the nuts back up. And then put our cover back on. And there we have it. Our battery switch is now complete. To begin step 3 of the battery to inverter power cable assembly, we've moved out to the garage so we can make sure our cable lengths are correct, and so we can mount both the battery switch that we just assembled and the fuse holder. My battery bank is just below the shelf where my inverter is going to sit. So I'm going to put both my battery switch and my fuse holder below the shelf, right between the battery bank and the inverter. Okay, let's get started. First, both the black power cable and the red power cable need to be the same length. Right now the black one is 3 feet and the red one is over 4 feet. Why? Well, remember, we added the 1 foot long red power cable and we are going to add the 3-inch fuse in line. That's 15 inches. So in order to make the red power cable only 3 feet, which is the same length as the black power cable, we need to cut 15 inches out of the center of the red power cable. So let's do that now. Let's make our first cut even with the 1 foot red power cable. Let's grab our pen. We'll mark it right here. Then let's measure 15 inches from the first mark, and we'll make a second mark. Now, let's grab our utility knife and we will cut the outer skin first. Once you've cut all the way around your mark with the utility knife, move over about 3/4 of an inch and cut another mark. Now that we've finished cutting all the way around the skin at the first mark, and we've cut all the way around the skin 3/4 inches below the first mark, we're going to go ahead and cut all the way through the cable 3/4 of an inches below the first mark. Okay, let's set that piece aside for a moment. Now we need to peel back this remaining piece of skin. be careful not to cut your conductor. If you need to, cut a little vertical line from the tip to your first cut. That may help peel the skin back and get it off the conductor. Just kind of keep playing with it until you're able to get it off, and again, be careful. Don't cut yourself and don't cut the conductor. It may also help to use a little pair of wire clippers so you can get in and cut the skin off. Again, be careful not to cut your conductor. There we go. We peeled the outer skin, and we've got about 3/4 of an inch of conductor sticking out. Now let's begin cutting the second mark right here. Remember, we measured 15 inches from this end down to this mark right here. Let's go ahead and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to cut all the way around the skin at the mark, and then we're going to go in about 3/4 of an inch and cut all the way through the cable. So let's begin by cutting around the skin at our 15-inch mark. Again, be careful, don't cut through the conductor. And then measure about 3/4 of an inch this way and begin cutting all the way through the conductor. If you want, you can cut through the skin first, but it doesn't really matter. We're going to cut all the way through the conductor. Okay, we've cut through the conductor, and now let's pull this little 3/4 inch piece of skin off. You may want to cut a little vertical line between the end of the cable and that first cut. Use our wire cutters and see if we can get in there and cut this skin back. Again, be careful not to cut the conductor itself. There we go. Now we've got rid of our extra 15 inches. and we are left with 3 feet of red cable. We have now removed that extra 15 inches from the red power cable. So let's set that aside. And now we are going to insert the fuse holder into the red power cable assembly. Let's begin by removing the cover off the fuse holder. We're going to remove the 4 screws that are holding the cover down. Once you've loosened all the screws, go ahead and remove the cover, set it aside, get an Allen wrench and unscrew the 2 bolts that are on the front. Then get your 200 amp fuse, put it on the fuse holder just like this with the 200 amp label facing upward, and replace the screw and the washer on top of the fuse, thread it back into the holes. Get your Allen wrench, tighten it up so that there's a good contact between the fuse and the fuse holder. Then go ahead and loosen the 2 bolts on top. Again, with your Allen wrench, don't take them all the way out, just loosen them up. Okay, now we're ready to attach the fuse holder with the fuse and the battery switch to the side of our shelving unit, and we're almost done with our power cable assembly. Now, to make this easy, I'm going to mount the battery switch to a piece of scrap plywood, and I'm going to use 2.5 inch wood screws to do that. Just be careful not to tighten the screws too tight, or else you'll crack the plastic case on the battery switch. Now grab the fuse holder. We're going to take the end from the battery switch that has the bare conductor, and we're going to insert it into the fuse holder just like this. However, you're going to find that the cable will not go in all the way because the skin is too thick. So we're going to grab our utility knife and we're going to shave down some of this skin so that it will make a nice snug fit into the fuse holder. Once you've shaved off enough of the outer skin of the conductor, go ahead and insert it into the right opening of the fuse holder. Make sure it's nice and snug. Then grab your Allen wrench and go ahead and tighten the bolt down. Make sure it's nice and snug. Make sure the cable is not wiggling or loose. Then get the last piece of the red power cable that has the bare conductor end and do the same thing. Shave off enough of the outer skin so that we can fit this conductor into the other side of the fuse holder. Now for everything to fit right on my shelving unit, I need to secure the fuse holder onto the back of my scrap piece of plywood, just like this. I'm going to get a couple small screws. Screw them in. Now let's replace the cover of the fuse holder. Our power assembly is now complete. Let's go ahead and get it mounted between the battery bank and the inverter. As you can see, I have my batteries down on the ground below the shelf above with the inverter, and you can see I've got a couple holes where I'm going to run my red power cable and my black power cable through to connect to the positive and negative terminals on the inverter. And then we've got our power assembly here. We've got our switch on one side. We've got our fuse on the other side. And remember which end goes to the inverter. It's the end that comes from the battery switch to the smaller connector. I'm going to go ahead and mount our power assembly onto this part of the frame of my shelf. We are now finished with the power assembly. As you can see, we go from the positive terminal on the battery up to the fuse, to our battery switch, through our battery switch to the positive end on our inverter terminal. We are now complete and on to the next item.